This is a presentation of BSRN, Box Studios Radio Network.
Hi, this is Don Biggs from the 92-93 Binghamton Rangers.
Hi, this is Brandon Buchinski.
This is Grady Wittenberg, the voice of the Binghamton Senators, and you're listening to the Power Play Post Show.
Hi, I'm Corey Cowick, left wing for the Binghamton Senators, and you're listening to Bob Howard on the Power Play Post Show.
And hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Power Play Post Show. This is episode 379. This is season 12, episode 6 for April 20th, 2023. Welcome back, everybody, to the Power Play Post Show. I'm very excited to have you here. I have a great guest a little bit later on in the show. We're going to talk to Phil Giubileo. He's the play-by-play broadcaster for Quinnipiac. They just won the national title. We're going to talk to Phil about a lot of things D1 hockey related, a couple other things also on the docket with Phil. Very good interview. 18th time he's been on the Power Play Post Show. Did a lot of games, obviously 9 years worth of games with the Bridgeport Sound Tigers and whatnot. And you'll have to listen to his answer about the Bridgeport Islanders name. So a lot of fun there with Phil. So he's coming up. But the end of the season happened in the FPHL this past weekend. And all the games are done. 56 games played by all 10 teams. So the Black Bears finished the season with 2 wins in a home-and-home series versus the Elmira Mammoth. On Friday night, they beat the Elmira Mammoth 10-3. This was the 4th time this year that the Black Bears had scored double-digit goals. It's just the way it is in the Fed. You know, you can get up to double digits in goals against certain teams. They certainly have done that against Elmira. They did that twice against Elmira, once against Motor City, and I think once against Delaware. It might have been Port Huron and Delaware, and then Elmira twice. Tyler Jurich and Donald Oliveira and Andrew Lurgar both scored. All 3 of them scored 2 goals each in this game. Jurich had 3 assists and finished with 5 points on the night. I mean, he's finishing the season just the way he started the season. Oliveira and Logar both finished with 3 points each as they both had an assist to go with their 2 goals. Taylor Joseph now has 10 wins up to this game on the season, winning his last 5 starts, and looks primed to carry the load into the playoffs, which start this upcoming Friday. For all the teams, there was a game, I believe, tonight as I'm recording. I haven't checked the score and everything. 8 skaters had points in this game, with all 8 scoring at least 2 points or more in the contest. Tyson Kirkby had the Gordie Howe hat trick, having an assist and one of Tyler Jurich's goals, and then scoring his own goal, which led to a fight immediately afterwards against Elmira's Thomas McGuire. Very interesting how that kind of all happened. Friday night's game was feisty and rough, and the 2 teams combined for 102 penalty minutes. Josh Newberg and Justin Semeraro did not dress for this game. The Black Bears have now scored 61 goals versus the Mammoth, while the Mammoth have only scored 24 goals in the 10 games they've played so far. That led into Saturday night's game in Binghamton. Pretty good crowd, I think 4,500 fans at the arena for the final game. They beat Elmira 5-4. A little bit different type of game. I think Elmira pushed back a little bit harder. They played a lot of 2-on-1 hockey. What do I mean by that? Every time the Black Bears had the puck, the Elmira Mammoth would put 2 guys on that guy. And they also went behind the net a lot of times. So if Black Bears were trying to set up behind their net, the Mammoth would send a guy down below. Now, there's a risk at doing that, which did affect the game a couple different times, where when you got past that guy, it was almost like a 5-on-4 going the other way because he was obviously behind the play. And so there's some risk to that, but it did disrupt the way the Black Bears normally play their game. However, Donald Oliveira continued to shine for the Black Bears, scoring 2 more goals in tonight's game and now has 12 goals in 15 games played. Interesting note for Donald Oliveri, he played in enough games now to qualify for the playoffs. He played in his 15th game on Saturday night. No matter how hard, unfortunately for Tyson Kirkby, no matter how hard he tried, including a slap shot to the face of Mammoth netminder, Tyson Kirkby did not extend his six-game goal streak. And the word is that he may have lost an end-of-season bet with Tyler Jurich on goals scored. Connor Smith had a beautiful game-winning goal in the third period with his fifth of the season in 6 games he's played this season for the Black Bears. And it was one of those where he went right down the slot, crossed over in front of the goaltender, and just took the shot before he actually got to the goaltender and was able to beat him. And it was just a beautiful goal. And you can see why... Connor Smith coming from a national championship, club hockey team, just did really, really well. Austin Thompson goal on Saturday night was his 29th of the season, and with his 27 helpers, ended the regular season with 56 points in 49 games. I think he's going to be a big, important part of the playoffs for the Black Bears. Secondary scoring, maybe you can say he's part of the top tier of scoring now for the Black Bears. Without a doubt, this was the best line in the game and maybe the best line in the FPHL right now. Consists of Tyler Jurich, Tyson Kirkby, and Gavin Yates, especially with Donald Oliveri is one of the D-men on the ice for those three. Tonight, Saturday night, those 4 men combined for 3 goals, 4 assists, and 7 points. Taylor Joseph has cemented his place as the team's number 1 goaltender with his 7th straight start and 6th win in his 11th on the season. Black Bears were 10-1 over the Mammoth this season, the second team they won double digits against this season. They were a perfect 10-0 versus Delaware as well. All right, so now the Black Bears move on to their attention is the Watertown Wolves for the first round of the FPHL's Commissioner Cups playoffs. Game 1 will be in Watertown Friday night at 7:30. Game 2 in Binghamton on Saturday night at 7 o'clock. Game 3 will be, if needed, in Binghamton on Sunday night, 6 p.m. From the Veterans Memorial Arena. Binghamton has won the series 7-1 against the Watertown Wolves. Total goals for was 43. Total goals against was 18. So they dominated, really scoring goals, and obviously dominated most of the games. Power play goals, 12 for the Black Bears against the Watertown Wolves. Goalies in those games, Paulin had 1 win for the Black Bears. Jeremy Forget had 1 win for the Black Bears. And Riley McVeigh played the majority of the games against the Wolves. He was 5-1 against the Wolves in the season, the regular season. Goals scored by players. Tyler Jurich had 7 goals against the Wolves. Kirkby had 6. Ivashkin had 5. He obviously will not be playing in the playoffs. Anderson had 4. Thompson had 4. Yates 3. Lopez 3. Parker 2. Oliveri 2. Yarwood, Powell, Bussell, who will not be playing for the Black Bears in the playoffs. Coachman, Schultz, Lewis, Logar, all with 1 goal each. Team stats, the Binghamton Black Bears, they had a goals for average this season of 5.1 per game. The Watertown Wolves is at 2.9. So you can see that the two teams are madly different. Power play, Binghamton was 27% on the season. Number 1 in the league. Watertown was 14%. Team leaders heading into the playoffs. Binghamton, Tyler Jurich has 69 points, 32 goals, and 37 assists in 43 games. Tyson Kirkby, 30 goals, 36 assists, 66 points in 50 games. Gavin Yates, 21 goals, 38 assists, and 59 points in 42 games. That right there is your first line for the Binghamton Black Bears. Austin Thompson will probably be somewhere on the second line, 29 goals, 27 assists, 56 points in 49 games played. And Taylor Joseph, this season, 11, 2-2, 3.06 goals against average, 91% save percentage. Watertown, Elijah Wilson, 27 goals, 23 assists in 40 points in 42 games. And Trevor Lord, 14 goals, 19 points, 33 points altogether. Sorry, my apologies. 14 goals, 19 assists, 33 points in 55 games. Only one game away playing the full season for the Watertown Wolves. And our old friend, Owen Liskowitz, 10-18-0, 3.89 goals against average, 89%, 90% save percentage. It's 8.96. We'll average it up. He will more than likely be the goaltender that the Black Bears will see. He's done okay against the Black Bears, but he's had his moments as well. 10 players playing on the Watertown Wolves roster played on other FPHL teams this season. And so that's pretty much it. I think it's going to be, listen, here's my opinion. I think if Watertown is going to win a game, it'll be on Friday night. And then I think the Black Bears will take the other two games to win the series and move on. However, it should be interesting, and I think what you're going to probably see is hopefully Binghamton is ready and prepared. We've seen sometimes on Friday nights when they go into certain cities, especially on the road, that they don't play as well the first 20 minutes. Let's hope that the Binghamton Black Bears get on the right page quickly in the game up in Watertown. It'd be nice to finish it off in 2, but we'll see what happens. Obviously, they got to play on. Listen, the numbers on paper look lopsided. Looks like Binghamton is going to run away with this, but they have to play the games on the ice first. This is the second year the Binghamton Black Bears are going into the playoffs consecutively. Last year, we all know that they won one game against Danbury, lost the next 2. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. I have faith in them. I think they're really going to step up. There's a good chance that they could win both games, the first 2 games. But I wouldn't be surprised if Watertown's going to win a game. It's more than likely going to be in front of their home fans, which will be on Friday night. That'll be where that game is. But I want to move on to my guest. He is Phil Giubileo. He's Quinnipiac's men's and women's play-by-play broadcaster. He also does the Connecticut Whale in the Women's Professional League, which is great. And he used to be the former Bridgeport Sound Tigers broadcaster. And this is his 18th time coming on the show. But he can talk about D1 hockey, and fans, I encourage you to listen to this interview. We talk about a lot of things, even including about getting Binghamton a D1 program and what it's going to take for it to be successful. So this is definitely something that you want to listen to, and I want to thank Phil for coming on the show. And so I'm going to leave it with that. So coming up next here on the Power Play Post Show is Phil Giubileo. We'll be right back right after this.
Hi, this is Don Biggs from the 92-93 Binghamton Rangers.
Here's Don Biggs taking a slash and following through. He's hauled down. Now we have Don Biggs having a fisticuffs with Possum.
And you're listening to the Power Play Post Show.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Power Play Post Show. I'm very excited, as always, to have this gentleman on. He was on 17 times. We've had 17 conversations. This will be number 18 with this gentleman, and he's not even doing the American Hockey League anymore. No. He is Phil Giubileo, and he is actually now the lead play-by-play broadcaster for Quinnipiac University hockey, men's and women. And, of course, he also does the Connecticut Whale games in the PHF. Phil, welcome back to the show. It's a pleasure to talk to you, and we just had a really great conversation before we started recording, and it's just great to hear your voice. It really is.
Same here, Bob, and thank you so much for having me. And it's like deja vu. It's been years since we've had an opportunity to talk. So I'm really excited to be here with you.
Yeah, it was 2015 the last time you were on the show. It was season 11 for the Power Play Post Show. And, when I brought it back, I was like, I could rename the show. I could do all these other things. But I was like, people know it. People know the Power Play Post Show. So this is season 12. We just had a nice long break in between. But you've also changed. I think in 2015, that was the last season that you did games for the Bridgeport Sound Tigers, and then you kind of moved on to other things. Talk about, going and doing college hockey, and of course doing the Connecticut Whale. Back then, I think it was in the NWHL, if I remember correctly, before they changed over to the PHF. Which came first? I believe the Connecticut Whale before Quinnipiac, right?
Indeed. So 2015, that was my last season, as you mentioned, in the AHL with the Sound Tigers, and I left after that season. it just didn't work out for me to come back for a season 10, which would have been nice, but it opened up the opportunity for me that very next year to be the very first announcer hired by the NWHL, which happened to be for the Connecticut Whale, and I did all of their games. But I was also like the league's main play-by-play announcer come playoff time, so I did the first 3 Isabel Cup championships. I did a bunch of playoff games for them during the first 3 years, and then I kind of settled back into doing the Whale games. You mentioned the PHF a couple of years ago that switched from the NWHL to the PHF. Same league, different name, same teams other than the expansion clubs that have come in since with Toronto, the Six, and the Montreal Force. And, this year I came back. I had spent the pandemic season was like kind of like a little mini year in 2020, and then 21-22 I didn't do any games, but I came back to the league last season, and I did do some Whale games, but I also did games for most of the teams in the league. It's an interesting setup where you get to do multiple games in the course of a weekend. We do them remotely. You don't really miss a beat. There's a great crew that we work with down in Florida, so the weather is much nicer, and it's kind of fun getting to do 2 or 3 games in different cities over the course of the weekend and kind of work as a league voice. And just like with Quinnipiac, our games are on ESPN Plus, right, which is great as well because I'm really familiar with the format. So doing that professional women's league was the first thing that kind of came after Bridgeport. And then starting in 2017 is when I hooked on with Quinnipiac. And at first I did some color commentary on the radio side for men's hockey, and I did some fill-in work on TV broadcasts on the women's side. Bill Schweitzer, who is kind of the very long-time voice of Quinnipiac for like 20 years plus. He's probably most well-known, aside from all the stuff in Connecticut. He did a lot of work in New York for many years. And then way back, if you remember the year when Villanova won the national championship under Raleigh Massimino, and it was kind of like a Cinderella story. Yep. He was their play-by-play guy that year. So that's kind of like the big championship that he called back in the day, and he retired after 2018. So after that, I had a more permanent role with the broadcast crew. I did a year on TV for color commentary, and after that, I got bumped up to the play-by-play role, and I've been doing play-by-play for a few years on both of the women's and the men's games, and it's been an absolute blast. I mean, the facilities are amazing. The athletic department is top-notch and fantastic to work with, and the players and the coaching staffs of both programs, Cass Turner on the women's side, Rand Pecknold on the men's side are just, very, very high, high class, high culture individuals. They run their programs that way, and they're just amazing to work with.
How is it different though when you were calling games for the American Hockey League or in the American Hockey League with the Bridgeport Sound Tigers? There's a format, there's a way of doing the broadcast. Is it any different doing the collegiate games and or in the professional women's league?
Well, yes, from a broadcast side for sure, because when I started in Bridgeport, it was more of a radio broadcast. And then, eventually over time, the video side became a little bit more prevalent, but really all of my years with the Sound Tigers, it was a radio play-by-play that, eventually you could watch the video on AHL Live or whatever. It started with, it was the B2 networks. I remember when I first started in that league, and that was the league. That was what I was familiar with in the UHL even before that, and morphed over to AHL Live so you could get the pay-per-view video. But it was always a radio broadcast because the people didn't really want to spend a lot of money, and it was expensive on AHL Live to get the whole season. I think it costs more to get AHL Live than it was to get like the full season NHL package, which to me seems absurd, but that's what it was back then, and no control over the pricing. So I always had 3 radio streams or on radio. We did radio one year, but usually it was on a just streaming audio link, and so I was always calling a radio broadcast, and most of the time it was me by myself, especially on the road. There were a couple of years I had some analysts at home games, and when I got over to Quinnipiac, once I settled in on ESPN, I mean, it's very much a TV production.
Yeah.
So from the broadcast perspective, and same thing with the PHF, it's very much a TV production, multiple cameras and replays, and you're really addressing the audience as if it's a TV broadcast as opposed to radio. So it changes my personal style a little bit as far as play-by-play, and it's definitely much more collaborative because, you know, I've got people down in a broadcast booth talking to me and talking to my color analysts, whoever it happens to be that day, and, you know, so it's a TV production, whereas in Bridgeport, it was just me. Now, no one was directing me on what shots were coming up or anything like that. I just called the game. So it was just me by myself or me with a color analyst, and that's the big difference. That's the big difference between radio versus TV in any play-by-play scenario.
Yeah, I think I did 3 games with Grady Wittenberg on TV, and it was the worst. Having someone talking in my ear, you know, all the time, the cameraman making jokes. You know, you don't. Some people don't realize unless you've actually done a TV game, some of the chatter that is going on behind the scenes, and it might be different in other cities and other broadcast productions, I'm sure. But unfortunately, I got very acquainted with one guy's eating habits, one of the cameraman's eating habits. Basically, he was talking about, you know, what he was going to eat during a break or whatever, and you found out pretty quickly those kind of things. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, Quinnipiac. Obviously, they won the national championship this year against my Minnesota Golden Gophers. Congratulations to them. A worst 10 seconds of an overtime that I've ever witnessed as a hockey fan, but probably one of the most brilliant 10 seconds that I've ever seen in a hockey game. You were down there with Mike Fornabayo, who is, you know, a good friend of the show as well, and everything. Talk about that experience, because obviously you were there. You called a bunch of games, obviously a lot of the home games through the season and everything, and of course it becomes a more national broadcast later on when they get into the tourney and everything. But talk about what you saw throughout this season leading up to that national title game.
This was such a special team, you know, for me. So in all the times I watched Quinnipiac in person, I only got to see them lose one game, which was up at Lake Placid. And they lost in overtime to Colgate in the ECAC semifinals. I was the bench reporter for the games, and you know they brought in a few guys from different cities, and they asked me to do kind of between the benches for those games. It's the only time I saw the Bobcats lose, and they were unbeaten at home. There was a tie, otherwise they were undefeated, you know, in their home building. And what I've seen with that group is just such a dominant team, really led by, you know, a group of grad students and upperclassmen, whether they were with the program for 5 years, led by their captain, Zach Metza, or transfer students like Jake Johnson, who came in, who played at RPI, and Jacob Nordquist, who played at, you know, Lake Superior State. So it was a very veteran group on one hand, and then on the other side, you had a bunch of really young guys. So when you saw those 10 seconds, those are the young guys that went out there. The top line were, a freshman and 2 sophomores, and, you know, Jacob Quillen going to the net and taking that pass from Sam Lipkin and scoring is, are things that I've seen during the course of the year. Quillen's that type of guy. He's either a beast in the corner, digging pucks out for Colin Graff and for Lipkin, or he goes hard to the net like he did on that play. And, like even the young guys. And the thing with that team was the culture, and it was kind of a slow build, you know, over the course of the past several years. So each year, the seniors, and it's really, you know, the culture is set by Rand Packnold, who just finished his 29th season as head coach of Quinnipiac, and it's hard because he's still a fairly young guy. Like, he took that job at 27 years old as a Division III head coach and started the Division I program. But, you know, he really sets the culture. But it's the upperclassmen, it's the seniors that kind of really develop that culture and maintain it through the underclassmen. And it's like that growing, building process. And I've seen it kind of play out through a bunch of classes over the last, 5 or 6 years. So, my first couple of years with the team, Chase Prisky was the captain who played in the American League this year. He finished the year with San Diego. He played some NHL games and, was just an amazing captain. And it went from him to Nick Germain, who plays in the ECHL, to Odin Tufto, and now to Zach Metza, and just great leaders. And even if you're an upperclassman who doesn't wear a letter, just really good leadership. The buy-in is just it's just amazing buy-in. You think about how, and it doesn't necessarily matter what league you're in. You always have it always seems that there are a team of players that they have their own agenda, or they kind of just want to do things a little bit differently. And with this particular Quinnipiac team, it was not like that at all. Like, everybody was just on the same page. Everyone was just 100% buy-in. You never saw a team play a bad game. Mm-hmm. You could see them play. They might have a down period here and there, but I never saw that team play a bad 60 minutes. Whereas, as I've called many, many games, and I've called many, American Hockey League games where I've seen stinkers from one team or the other over the course of like 60 minutes. They just don't really show up for a night, and that happens. I didn't see that at all with this team. And then at the end of the day, to me, they had, even though Devon Levi won the Mike Richter Award, I thought Yanni Perez was the best goaltender in the nation. And if he wasn't the best, he was obviously one of the three best, because he was a finalist for the Richter Award. And when you have an elite goaltender like that, to start things off, and then just a lot of talent throughout the lineup, it's a hard team to beat. And I know not a lot of household names, but that's just what that team was all about. It's just about buying into a system and committing, and it's not about the individuals on that group.
There are 4 current players playing in the NHL that played with Quinnipiac. There are 3 others that also played. When I looked up that number, I was kind of surprised. And then the conversation I had with you just beforehand was that the people that they bring in are people that are going to buy into Rand's system and the way he really wants to develop a team and whatnot. And I asked you this question, and I just want you to answer it on air. Do you think that is going to change a little bit? Do you think more guys are going to come in because of this national championship that might be, closer to number 1, even second round kind of draft picks coming to Quinnipiac? Do you think that'll change at all, or do you think Rand will stick to what he's always done?
Well, I think it's a yes and no answer, and let me explain here. I think at the end of the day, and Rand Pecknold's always said this, they have to, they look for a particular mindset with players. They look for, they want to make sure that there's a high hockey IQ. They want to make sure that the players are going to be fully committed to the culture that's set by the program, and that's, there's a lot of integrity that's built into that culture, and a lot of commitment that's built into the culture when you talk about that buy-in. I don't think he's not going to stray away from that.
Sure.
I don't think he's ever going to stray away from that. Now, if you find, where the door opens a little bit more, is you might get guys with that mindset that, could be a first-round pick or a second-round pick, higher NHL draft picks, or maybe more of a quantity. But ultimately, it's that X factor. They still have to kind of buy into that culture, and whatever that secret sauce is, here's the thing, what they're really good at doing is reading, and you have to figure it out. It's hard when these players are, 15, 16, 17 years old. They're young, it's hard. At the end of the day, teenagers are teenagers, but they just have such a great success rate at kind of seeing who these young players are at such a young age and realizing that they're going to grow to be like these, high IQ, high culture buy-in types of players. And if he can find those players that happen to also be NHL draft picks and get a few more of them on the roster, I guess, sure. But ultimately he has a set way of how he wants to kind of set up his team, and that's what they do. And the other thing too, what they're really good at is really developing. They're able to see those diamonds in the rough with talent and with ability. It's one of the things where, for instance, a lot of teams shy away from smaller players.
Sure.
You see a lot of programs, they don't want little guys. And Quinnipiac's a program that they've always drafted. They've always brought in smaller guys. Odin Tupto is a smaller guy that was an amazing offensive college hockey player. Sam Annis, who plays for the Hershey Bears right now, and I think a couple of years ago led the AHL in scoring or at least in goals. Is a smaller guy. I mean, I talked to Sam Annis was at a game a couple of years ago, and I loved it because he's my height. We're like the same height. I'm not very tall, and it's great. And but he was just such a dynamo that. But other teams would stay away from guys like that because, he's a little guy or whatever. And, Rand doesn't shy away from that. So they're really good at developing talent. The strength and conditioning coach, Bree Patel, he's one of the best in the country at what he does. He gets everything out of these guys. And I think conditioning, you mentioned Minnesota, a big part of it. In fact, it was mentioned on the broadcast. John Butcher-Ross brought it out literally right before the goal, talking about conditioning and Brajesh Patel. And, I think it's true. I mean, if you saw the team that had more juice in that second half of the game, it was Quinnipiac. And I think part of that has to do with the strength and conditioning that they bring to the table. And you kind of need that with the way that, Quinnipiac runs their system. I think that it does open the door when you have a championship under your belt. But by no means is it going to, define that, you're going to see things swing the other way as it goes to the pendulum. Because, you're not going to just see a bunch of first-round picks come in. I don't see that happening. I still think that it's going to be done in the way that Rand's done it over the years.
Now, Phil, I brought you on because you're a friend, number one, of the show. You've always been very good to me. But Binghamton University announced about 2 weeks ago that they are pursuing a D1 hockey program. And I was like, wait a second here. Do I know a guy who, is a part of a D1 program? And of course I do. I know Phil Giubileo and Quinnipiac and, Division III 25 years ago. They go to Division I. And, 25 years later, the fruits of, the labor is there. How, in your opinion, you've been to Binghamton. You've seen hockey games here, obviously, as a broadcaster and whatnot. How difficult is it going to be to start a program? One of the things that you told me before we got on the air is that there's room to grow in D1 hockey. I didn't realize that. I didn't think there was going to be enough space for a Binghamton team to come in and to potentially field, a team that could be competitive maybe in 5 years.
Oh, I think there's definitely room for more Division I hockey programs everywhere. To be completely honest, I mean, there's only around 60. I mean, compare that to Division I basketball. True. I think there's well over 300. So for Division I hockey, only to have around 60 Division I programs right now, to me, it feels like a small number when you look at the plethora of junior hockey in the United States between the USHL and the North American Hockey League. And the USHL provides a lot of talent to Division I colleges, and so does the North American League. And then you go to Canada, where you have leagues like the BCHL, the British Columbia Hockey League, the AJ, which is the Alberta Junior Hockey League, and those leagues provide a lot of talent as well. And you can even go in the States. You look at like Minnesota. What's interesting about Minnesota is almost, and the Gophers in particular, most of those players come right out of like Minnesota high school.
Yes.
And Minnesota high school hockey in itself is kind of like a breeding ground for Division I college hockey, and even a lot of the prep schools in the Northeast, where you see them, they go prep and then they play junior for a year or two, and then they're 19 or 20 and they start playing college hockey. And why do I think there's an ability for Binghamton to develop a program? One, I think there's a lot of talent out there. And so I think that that alone, in a few years can bring some players to the university to play. Binghamton's a good school. I think that helps as well academically. And also where I think now the big equalizer in hockey is with the transfer portal, because players now are entering the transfer portal. You have that one-time opportunity to transfer without having to sit out a year. And you see a lot of players, some of these bigger programs over-recruit. And if these freshmen don't get a chance to play right away, they're looking for an opportunity to go somewhere else and get ice time. And if you're a new program, well, there's going to be ice time. If you're a good player and you can crack a lineup, you're going to get an opportunity to play. And so schools like Binghamton, I think, have an opportunity to capitalize, whereas, LIU has done that in the last couple of years, and Augustana University is going to be playing their first year of D1, and I'm seeing a lot of guys in the transfer portal from good conferences going over to play at Augustana. St. Thomas was the same way, and Binghamton can end up, kind of part of that as well. Obviously, you want to have good resources and facilities. You want to have good coaching and support. It sounds like the university is willing to support this and make a big investment, and if they're willing to do that, why not?
Yeah, it's very interesting. This has been a pro hockey town for a very long time. We had the BCC Hornets play in one of the North American junior collegiate programs. That failed out about 5 years ago. And so we actually have the club hockey team for BU right now that won their national championship in the first year that program decided to have a national championship tourney and everything. So we've always been a hockey town, and I'm curious to what you think. You know a little bit about Binghamton just from talking to me, and of course, being here calling games. Can you foresee the Binghamton fans, kind of supporting, not just supporting financially two teams, but two different types of hockey, because it is going to be a little bit different. You're going to have a high-quality player, maybe not necessarily always the best games, and then you're going to have a pro team that might bring some more of the rough stuff to the game as well. Do you foresee, Binghamton hockey fans being able to kind of gel those two together and still support them?
I believe they can. If you can get, for the college side, a big key is getting the student support. If you can get students out to the games,
sure.
and I know that dormitories are right near, if they're going to play in the downtown building, they're right nearby. So you should have the opportunity to get students to the games. That's always a key with the college side of things, where you have a separate audience from the pro side. You want to have, obviously, a core of those fans support both teams. I think that's kind of important in any city. But I think so. And, a good example just kind of popped into my head. I think of Utica.
Okay.
So in Utica, you have the Comets that sell out just about every game on the American Hockey League side. And then you have Utica College, which is a Division III school, and they get tremendous support for their games. And it's D3, but they're a top D3 program, and they get a lot of fans at their games as well. So I mean, if a city like Utica could do it, I don't see why Binghamton couldn't. A lot of things have to come into place, and there needs to obviously be a lot of not just coordination between the professional team and the university and the city, but a lot of cooperation, right? If it becomes any scenario where there's going to be any kind of contention, where, one side wants to get more than the other, I think then, it's going to be a challenge. Mm-hmm. But if you can get the right kind of coordination and buy-in from everybody, there's no reason why it can't succeed for both of the programs.
Yeah, one of the things that you and I were talking about beforehand, and you mentioned this, was, doing double headers and somehow working those two things together. I just thought to myself, well, wait a second here. The Rumble Ponies just played this past week in their first home game on a Saturday, and it was the last final game. And I know the Senators and the Binghamton Devils did this. They did the, buy one ticket, go to both games type of thing. Mm-hmm. And that is definitely something that you brought up that I had forgotten about, that we've been doing here with the baseball team that's here. That cooperation between two is obviously very key, and so there are other ways as well to do the same type of things. So it's very interesting. Phil, I have to ask, in the collegiate, the D1 realm, was it a surprise that Quinnipiac did what they did? Because there are probably about 10 teams in D1 hockey that are just classified as they're going to make it to the Frozen Four. These are the best teams, and it's going to be very hard to crack that. Was there, afterwards, did you read, did you get, did you talk to anybody that, basically was like, wow, I'm surprised they actually did it? No,
and I know that sounds crazy, but, here's the thing. most recent Frozen Four was the third one. The Bobcats have reached a Frozen Four championship 3 times in the last 10 seasons, which is a pretty high number.
Yeah.
They lost to Yale back in 2013, and then they lost to North Dakota in 2016. So, getting to the Frozen Four, getting to that championship game wasn't unfamiliar ground to them, that they've been able to do it, that they won. It's the third time's the charm. I think eventually they were going to win one. It was one of those things where, in our circles, we would always talk about at some point they're going to win one. Like it wasn't a question of what if. It's always been a question of when they were going to win one. And seeing some off the beaten path teams win a championship's not entirely uncommon. You talk about the quote unquote blue bloods when you mentioned Minnesota, North Dakota, and BC, and some of the Michigan, and some of these other programs. Yeah, I mean they definitely exist.
Yeah,
but you could also see in the most recent tournament, teams like Penn State, and they haven't had a Division I hockey team very long. But some of those Big Ten schools have kind of they get on the map fairly quickly. Even though they have yet to win, I don't think the Big Ten, as the Big Ten hockey conference, they've yet to win a tournament.
None yet.
But the ECAC has won 3. Quinnipiac was joined by, in back-to-back years, it was Yale and then Union. Union College, of all teams, in 2014 won a national championship. And you want to talk about, a team coming out of nowhere. Union College, and at the time was non-scholarship. And they still, I think they're just starting to give out scholarships, but they had a great goaltender. They had Shane Goss-Despair, and they caught lightning in a bottle and won. So, just like, in basketball, I think it's a little bit different. When, you always would see in the basketball tournament, the Cinderella schools win. There's so many more teams involved in the tournament, and you'd see major upsets and stuff like that. College hockey is a little bit different in the sense that you don't have as many teams get to the tournament, so it's a bit of a smaller kind of setup, and there's fewer programs, so the bigger ones usually kind of show up. But Quinnipiac's a team in recent years; they get to the tournament every year.
Yeah.
So they're almost always there, and to see this is an experienced group. And when I look at these tournaments, particularly in hockey, if you can have an experienced group, and that's what Quinnipiac had. They were an older team that were together relatively a long time. I always feel like they have some level of an advantage over the teams that just kind of get put together and they're only around for a year or two. I think why people were really shocked in the case of Minnesota is that a lot of those guys did come back with the goal of winning the national championship. I think a lot of Gopher fans felt like it was going to be a foregone conclusion because so many of those players came back. A little bit different. You look at Michigan; they had some of those guys come back, but they also had some of their top guys leave. So it was a bit of a different mix with the Michigan team, but again, still a lot of first-round picks or potential first-round picks. When you look at Adam Fantilli, he's going to be the number 2 overall pick. So, maybe a bit of a surprise in that sense, but veteran guys, that ability to have a group around for 5 seasons, having elite goaltending, it did not surprise me to see them win the whole thing.
Okay, so before I let you go, I got 2 more questions. You can answer it however you want. These are kind of maybe fun questions, a couple fun questions here for you and everything.
Sure.
I'm just going to say 2 words, and I want your response to it. Bridgeport Islanders.
Oh, God. Did I say that?
That's what I wanted to hear.
I understand why.
Oh, I hate it. I hate it, Phil. I hate it.
I'm not a fan. I mean, again, I did Sound Tigers games for 9 years. I love the logo.
Yep.
I love the fact that it was a bit of a different identity, compared to the New York Islanders. What I thought was good about that different identity was that it did bring fans of all NHL teams together. Like when I worked those games, I knew so many Bridgeport Sound Tigers fans that were Rangers fans or that were Boston Bruins fans or rooted for other NHL teams, but they were okay with rooting for the Sound Tigers because it wasn't, the Bridgeport Islanders. And I know that watching it there's a blueprint, and you follow the American Hockey League for a long time, so
Yep.
you know when Lou Lamoriello, with the exception of when he was running Toronto, because he wasn't going to get away with it in Toronto.
No.
But anywhere else with the Devils, and his blueprint is it's a very top-down run organization, and that goes to your minor league teams. So I think the fact that the Worcester Railers are independently owned is the only thing that's stopping them from becoming the Worcester Islanders, because that's their ECHL team, and they do rely a bit on that ECHL team. And Worcester's a great hockey city. I love Worcester, and to me, it's just a little bit disappointing. And then it was disappointing as well to see that when they did get a third jersey, that it was the Fish Sticks, and I have no problem with the Fish Sticks jersey for the Islanders, because again, that's a nod to something that was a real part of their history.
Sure.
But Fish Sticks, and it has no tie at all to Bridgeport. And it would have been great to have the Sound Tigers as a retro logo or something like that for Sunday games and kind of keep them in the fold. But you know what? It is what it is. I get it. Doesn't mean that I have to like it. But it is what it is. I mean, that's all I can really say.
Okay.
Whether that lasts forever, I don't really know.
Yeah.
I think about when the Hartford Wolfpack became the Connecticut Whale for a year and a half, and then they went back.
Oh, that was so stupid.
Maybe everything old can become new again at some point. Who knows? Or everything new can become old.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see what happens. At some point, Lou Lamoriello will retire.
Yeah.
Because I think he's 80 years old, and I would be interested to see when a new general manager eventually comes in and kind of takes over that ship, if that name will stay. I wonder if it'll change. I mean, part of me thinks at some point in time it might.
Okay, so you got 5,000 points for that correct answer about that. I personally hate it when there is no identity for the American team. It drives me bonkers. I lived with that in Binghamton here for many, many, many years. The Icemen, the Dusters, and the Black Bears are the only three teams. Everybody else just took the stupid name of the NHL team, and I hated it. I hate that you feel that you need to push that cross-promotion of your NHL team in Binghamton, New York. Well, first of all, the Binghamton Senators had more New York Ranger fans as Binghamton Senators fans than they did Ottawa Senator fans. It's so stupid. But moving on, I want to know if you received your Emmy yet for being featured on the Netflix documentary series Untold, where you were a part of the episode Crime and Penalties. I just need to know, have you received your Emmy yet?
No Emmy award. As far as I know, no one has gotten an Emmy award, but it should. I mean, it's an outstanding episode.
Phenomenal.
Of the series, and really the whole series is great. So
right.
I mean, obviously I'm a bit biased on the Danbury Trashers episode, but there are
good.
about a dozen of these episodes, all wonderfully produced and directed. And I was happy that our episode was directed by McLean and Chapman Way, who are the Way brothers, are the executive producers of the entire series, and they directed our episode, and they spent a fair amount of time in Danbury, and I got to know them pretty well, and just two amazing young men, individual filmmakers that, when I heard they were coming to do it, when they were coming to do the production, I was super excited because I knew who they were. I knew who they were from Wild Wild Country, which is not a sports documentary, but it's amazing and mind-blowing. They did win an Emmy for that. They won an Emmy for Wild Wild Country. And if you folks haven't seen it, you should. It's just completely real and bizarre and mind-blowing. But they also did The Battered Bastards of Baseball, which is also on Netflix, and really well done. That was kind of what got them on the map in terms of documentary filmmaking. And if you've watched that, it's interesting because their uncle is Kurt Russell, the actor, and he was part of that Portland Renegades team that played independent minor league baseball, and their grandfather was the guy that owned the team, and he was an actor on Bonanza, Bing Russell. So there's all this acting stuff that kind of goes into it, and I loved it, being just a fan of minor league sports, and and thinking about how we ran things with the Trashers, and there was a little bit of that kind of going on with this Portland team. And I think partially that's kind of what drew the Way brothers to doing our episode of the Untold series. And they really did a great job. And what's funny is, it was an hour and a half, and there's probably enough to do. There was enough footage to do like another hour and a half. Like there's so much on the cutting room floor that could make a whole second episode, but you're limited when it comes to this Netflix stuff. And just mind-blowing. Like the whole experience was just amazing and mind-blowing, and it got me back in kind of the fold with a lot of the folks that made the film, obviously with the Galantes, and I talk to AJ all the time, and I talk to Jimmy a fair bit. Where I live now in Connecticut, it's about 20 minutes away from where they are because I'm in a different part of Connecticut than the last time you and I talked 7 years ago. We moved to a little bit more of a rural farm area just north of Danbury, and so the whole experience was just wonderful. So a very long-winded answer to the question, no
okay.
award.
No,
but I'll accept one if someone's willing to send me there.
All right, so I have to take 10 points away for not getting an award, but great answer. I was so happy to see you in that. I so thoroughly enjoyed. First of all, I enjoyed all the Untold, but seeing that, I knew the history a little bit. I talked to you about the history some here on the Power Play Post show. So that's what I was like, say to my wife, oh, he said that on my show. I was like, we talked about that. Some of the kind of the really cool stuff and everything. But I'm happy when I get to see prior guests on my show who came and did so much for my show, do so many cool things, even in the last 7 years, I've watched some, friends that have come on this show just do some really great things. Brendan Burke is now some big wig NHL, broadcaster and everything. And I've seen, even my friend Grady Wittenberg has done some Washington Capitol games. And he's back with Cornell and just some really cool stuff. It's really great to see. You sound just as good now as you did back then. And I really appreciate you coming back on the show. You've been awesome.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Bob. Appreciate it. You can have me on anytime.
And trust me, next year, D1 hockey, maybe we'll be talking about that. I think it's going to be a couple years before they get it here, but there might be other questions I have for you on it and everything. I'm a fan of the Minnesota Golden Gophers, but probably the inner workings, the logistics, all that stuff, I have no clue on. So you could be one of my guys and everything. He is Phil Giubileo, play-by-play broadcaster for Quinnipiac, Connecticut Whale. And we'll be right back right after this, right here on the Power Play Post Show.
Thanks for listening to this edition of the Power Play Post Show. Be sure to tune in next week from the Box Studios Radio Network to keep up to date with the latest news, scores, and interviews by visiting www.pppshow.net. You've been listening to the Power Play Post Show.